the radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show. Hope you've had a great week. Looking forward to the rest of the week and to a great weekend. All right, today we're going to talk about a number of things. We're going to talk a little bit about trade, Biden and Trump with regard to trade. We're going to talk about race relations. We're going to talk about what is the biggest threat with regard to race relations. We've had a lot of discussions here about left versus right. So I'm gonna let Glenn Loury and actually Charles Murray do a little bit of the talking today. So I'll show you some video of Glenn Loury and Charles Murray talking about what is the real threat that the United States, what is the biggest threat that the United States faces with regard to race relationship. So it's going to be hopefully a good show. Hopefully you'll enjoy it. I think having Charles Murray in the title will probably bring out some of the people who dislike me in particular. So I'm sure that'll make the chat lively as ever, or more lively than usual. All right, let's see. Ali's in the house, so Ali's here to make sure we reach our goal of $400, $400 per show. So don't forget to use the super chat to do the 400. It's been amazing how well it's gone in terms of raising, doing the super chat and reaching our goals. So don't make today the exception. All right, as you see, we're still playing around with the background and everything. So bookshelves, new bookshelves, that way, some way. Anyway, new bookshelves. They will have books ultimately, not quite yet, but they will have books. And those books, yes, that'll be stacked with books. And then we'll figure out whether I want the books in focus or out of focus. For those of you who missed David's right there. Whoops, there he is. That's David. David's back. Again, we might put him in focus once we get everything set up and everything looks good. And then we'll have to figure out, do we want to put a spotlight on him and everything. So a work in progress, but the new studio is working. You can see the new lights. I really like the new lights, the new camera. I really like the new camera. Hopefully you do too. The books are not dark gray, but the lights are off. And the wall is gray, so that's the color you're getting. Once we get the books in there, it'll give it a little bit more variation in color, and then I'll have to decide if to turn on the lights or not, or to leave it kind of grayish, coolish kind of thing. So we'll play around with this. Always eager to get your feedback and let me know what you think. I'm glad. I guess I'm glad I was talked out of going with the green screen. I think this is long-term going to be better and easier to use and less of a hassle technologically. All right, I actually want to start off with a video of Biden. So today is going to be just a little bit of a show where I say, I told you so. Just a little bit. So I want to start off with a clip from Biden. I mean, the guy is pretty pathetic, I have to say. But this clip is about the Second Amendment, and it's about gun rights. And what he says is pretty astounding, but completely consistent with what I've said for a long, long time. It's just, wow, to hear it from a president actually saying it is something, all right? So let me see if I can get this. Is it that? Yeah, there he is. There he is, President Biden. I don't know if you've seen this clip. It's partially funny because he can't talk and he can't form a sentence really without mumbling. But what he actually says is pretty astounding. It's pretty astounding. So here we go. Let me know if the volume's okay, because we're going to be listening to longer clips. This is a short clip, a few seconds, and I won't even interrupt him. I'll just let him say what he has to say in this short clip. It's in response to gun rights, the January 6th, all of that, right? Here we go.
All this stuff about how we're going to have to move against the government. Well, the tree of liberty is not water with the blood of patriots. What's happened is that there never been, if you wanted to think you need to have weapons to take on the government, you need F-15s and maybe some nuclear weapons. The point is,
so what he's saying basically is, Second Amendment's great, but the fact is that if you think you're going to take on the government, you better have F-15s and nukes. Now, I've said that over and over and over again over many, many years, right? Because I always say to people who want to have big guns at home, I say, in order to go up against the government, I always say, you got to be kidding me. I mean, the government has F-15s and nukes. What are you going to do? Now, they often say, the government wouldn't nuke its own people. They wouldn't use nukes against Texas. Well, you now heard it from the President of the United States himself, that he's basically telling you that if you're going to come up against the federal government, you better have something that can handle nukes, because they're bringing it. They're bringing their F-15s. They're bringing the nukes. They're ready to go. So, wow. Again, one thing for me to say, don't count on your AR-15s to take on the government, because they have bigger weapons. It's something else for the President of the United States to look at you and say, be careful, we have big weapons. That's quite a threat. Yeah, I mean, remember, Trump is what made Biden possible. So thank God we voted out Trump so we can get to Biden. Hopefully we can do better next time, but it doesn't look like it. But yes, I'm thankful every day that I watch the news that Trump was voted out. I'm depressed as hell that Biden was voted in, and I know that and that's not a contradiction. That's the reality. All right, let's see. So. With regard to the Second Amendment, and as I've said before, I don't think the Second Amendment's relevance is with regard to raising arms against the government. I think it's primarily relevant today with regard to self-defense. I think you have a right to defend yourself, and as a consequence, you have a right to bear arms, not the idea of rebelling against the government. We should be able to rebel against the government, but your handgun and your AR-15 is not going to do it. I'm not happy Biden won. I'm happy Trump lost. I'm very happy Trump lost. I'm sad that Biden is the guy who won, but it is what it is. That's the choices that you guys gave us, because particularly you guys who voted for Trump in 2016, this is what you gave us. This is the choice. All right, let me jump in here. I want to talk about race relations. So really for 5-6 years now, I've been talking about the fact that, really going back to Trump's campaign in 2015, 2016, primarily 2016, I've kept repeating the fact that what happens is that the elites and groups like Black Lives Matter, and certainly last year, white fragility and white guilt and all this stuff, that I don't think they, in and of themselves, the whole transgender stuff, in and of themselves, are far less damaging long-term to the culture in and of themselves that I still fear, and always fear, that the bigger damage long-term is not going to come from the left. The bigger damage long-term is going to come from the backlash against the left. That it's going to come from those who are so offended by what the left is doing, so alienated by what the intellectuals and the left is proposing, so sickened by it, and that as the left emphasizes race, talks constantly about race, talks constantly about racial identity, that the majority group in the United States, which are people who are white, will say, oh, we can play that game. We have an identity, therefore, that's white. That they will adopt a racial identity, which I don't think they have today. But they will adopt a racial identity. And they're the majority. So they're going to kick ass. And the left won't survive that. And that's the road, I think, to fascism and to violence and to horrors. That the left in itself can't win, but the left will cause, in a sense, the right to become much, much, much more collectivistic, tribal, and 1,000 times worse. And that ultimately is the real danger that we face. Now, I was shocked. I thought I was like, I mean, I've had other people who've said that, but I thought that's, I know that on the chat here, people have objected and people call me all kinds of names and people think I'm an apologist for the left because I think this and that I'm delusional about the right and so on. And maybe they're right, but what the hell? I figured I'd bring in a couple of authorities to bolster my view. And so this is complete by accident. I like watching Glenn Loury. I often watch him with John McWhorter. And I think there's some of the better intellectuals out there, certainly on issues of race. They're very, very strong and very, very good about this. So I was watching one of their episodes, and Glenn Loury goes into this whole description of basically the fear he has, which is exactly aligned with my fear. So I'm going to play you this clip. Just to give you some context, Glenn Loury is describing an interview he did with a long-form interview, which is behind a paywall on Fox with Tucker Carlson. He's discussing the generally positive experience he had with Tucker Carlson. I guess John McWhorter objected, didn't like the idea that Loury was going on Tucker Carlson's show. John is very, very anti Tucker and anti-Trump as well, but anti-Tucker. So that's the context. Loury is basically expressing how positive his experience was with Tucker and the kind of things that they talked about. And here is, so this is Glenn Loury. Let me just get him on screen. Here's Glenn Loury. This is Glenn Loury's discussion of this topic that he talked about with Tucker. Oops.
Glenn Loury, distinguished economist, agrees with me about X, Y, and Z, and therefore I was going to be a prop. And I was prepared. I was prepared to not be a prop by pushing back and saying, oh, but. But he didn't do that. He basically interviewed me in a manner more or less the way that Oprah might have interviewed.
Whoops, I didn't. It started earlier than I wanted to. Sorry. Let me skip ahead. It's around here.
This is something that I explore with Charles Murray next week as well. The growing possibility of white backlash in an age of identity. The possibility that not white supremacists, because they're out there and they've already got white identity stuff going on. But what about ordinary Joe and Jane, working class white person who doesn't think of themselves, especially as being white, until you remind them day in and day out with your critical race theory informed arguments that they are white, that they are supremacists, that they are privileged, that they're whatever. And what happens when they start embracing these notions of racial identity with a zeal? Because after all, if we're going to live in a world of racial identities, the largest one of them is going to be white. I mean, it amazes me. So Tucker and I agreed about this. It amazes me that people haven't figured this out. They add up the Chinese and Koreans with the Mexicans and Puerto Ricans, with the Nigerian immigrants, with the African Americans descended from slaves, and they find a number that's bigger than 50% soon enough. And then they declare white people are going to be in a minority. What they haven't figured out is that if white people actually are a race, self-consciously thinking of themselves as a race, they're going to be the largest of the groups by far. Even when they're less than 50%, they're still 45%. Black people are 13% of the population. Latinos are 18% of the population. So do you really want that? And we had, Tucker and I, an extended discussion about why you don't really want to encourage a world in which white people come to think. You say they already do? No, they don't. At the fringes, they do. But ordinary Jane and Joe are not walking around thinking about themselves as I'm a white person. What are white people's interests and so on? So we had a spirited.
So I completely agree with what he just said. I think that it's absolutely right. I think the biggest fear is that we move further towards tribalism, that we expand the scope of tribalism. Right now, much of the tribalism is being driven by the left, and much of that is being driven by African Americans on the left. But if we expand that tribalism to include whites as a group, as a tribe, the violence, the oppression, the authoritarianism, and by the way, some of you think they're your allies, these white supremacists, these white tribalists are your allies. But as soon as they're done with whatever is on the left, they'll go after whoever they think is an individualist, whoever doesn't fit. So the real danger is we continue that instead of the response to CRT, instead of the response to the left being individualism, the sanctity of the individual, the value of the individual, that the response be no, we are whites, we are smarter, we are whatever. Right? Whites aren't the smartest. That be the standard, that the tribalism be the standard. That's the end of freedom in this country. That's the real danger. Luckily in America, particularly over the last 50 years, we've moved away from viewing each other as members of races. Right? Of races. And what CRT is going to push people is to get back to that, is to get back to a view of race. And going back to that view is horrific. I've said often that I don't think race is a thing. It doesn't exist. It is a creation of pseudoscientists. It's a creation of racists. And to the extent that we're going to now embrace, or more and more people in this culture are going to embrace racism, and it'll be caused by the left, that is scary. That is truly a scary notion. And that's the worst damage, I think, that CRT is going to do. It's going to drive this country further and further towards greater and greater racism, towards greater and greater oppression, towards less and less freedom. And you're seeing that already. Now, just in case you're like, well, Glenn Loury, he's black, and we don't, he's, Iran and Glenn Loury, they're anti-white, whatever the hell that means. Instead, we want to hear what somebody like Charles Murray has to say. Charles Murray is one of those good guys, right? That some of you just love Charles Murray. So let's listen to Charles Murray, all right? Glenn Loury's going to start, and he's going to let Charles riff. And let's see what Charles Murray thinks the real threat is as a result of CRT and a result of all this horror on the left. And you can watch this on YouTube. This is a 15-minute segment of the interview. I'm only going to play a few of the minutes, 3 or 4 minutes, but you can watch the whole thing where he talks about the left. But it's interesting to talk about, to watch what he says, what he's going to say in the segment that I've got here. I know for many people, Charles Murray is a massive hero because of his work on IQ that validates for some people their sense of superiority because, according to Charles, because they're part of a group that has higher IQ, they therefore are superior. But Charles Murray's pretty old. All right, let's see what Charles has to say. I've met Charles. I don't know if you know, but we spoke at the same conference a few years ago. He's a really, really nice guy. So we had a chance to chat. Let me play this 1 second. Let me find it. There we go. Press play.
Without yet another reference.
Whoops, why am I again on the wrong timestamp? I switched the 2 timestamps. Sorry. I'll put the other video on this timestamp and put this timestamp on the one that I meant for the other video. All right, there we go. Now fixed. Go.
Let me see if I'm getting you. So there's a threat from the left and there's a threat from the right. You haven't talked about the threat from the right yet. The threat from the left around a kind of relativism that makes racially equal outcomes the god of their attention, and then looks away from facts and kind of anti-rational. And things like, I can't explain differences amongst individuals and their earnings in the labor market by reference to, amongst other things, differences in their cognitive ability. Give an example of that. But what is the threat from the right?
I like the way he characterizes, by the way, the threat from the left. It's about equality of outcome. It's about irrationality, the rejection of reason, the rejection of rationality. I mean, Glenn Loury is really good. If you want to see people fighting the CRT, I mean, really fighting, watch Glenn Loury and John McWhorter. I mean, these guys are really smart, and they know the enemy, and they're really fighting him. So he has a good sense of who the enemy on the left actually is. But let's get in on what Charles has to say.
This is where disaster is looming the closest. And I'm going to give a somewhat different take on it than probably other people have, but...
Now notice, this is where disaster is the most, right? This is where it's the worst, right? Where?
I'm not really worried about the white supremacists and the white nationalists. I think they're a very small component of the right. I'll tell you who I'm worried about. I'm worried about all of the working class and middle class whites who have had it beaten into their, they can't turn on the TV without yet another reference to the fact that they are bad people, that they have white privilege, that they have been the cause of blacks' problems and the problems of people of color in general, and that they had better take their ways or else. And an awful lot of these people are angered by this in a very visceral way. They're saying to themselves, hey, I have black colleagues at work, Latino work coworkers, and people in my neighborhood, and I treat them with respect, and I treat them with friendship, I have not behaved as a racist. I am trying to raise my kids and get them through college and make ends meet, and I'm working my ass off. And I sure don't see that I have any white privilege. And so you will not see an in-depth reporting on this kind of white person by the mainstream media. At least I haven't seen it. That's got to be a big number of people. And now let's get to the specifics here. Blacks constitute 12.7% of the population as of 2020. All right, Latinos are about 18% of the population. And let's face it, an awful lot of the energy for the progressive critical race theory is coming from blacks specifically. So now you got 13% of the population there. Non-Latino whites still constitute 60% of the population. That's way down from 30, 40 years ago, but it's still 60%. What is the proportion of that 60% who are really, really getting pissed? What is the proportion of them who are, and here's where the danger is, Glenn, are starting to say to themselves, well, guess what? I'm an identity too. And you want to play identity politics? Okay, we can go with that playbook. And if you get a substantial proportion of whites who not just voted for Donald Trump, you can have voted for Donald Trump for all sorts of reasons that doesn't make you far right. But no, it's no longer that. It's no longer political in the sense it was before. It's a much more racially grounded fight than it was before. Now, do I know for a fact that you have this phenomenon going on? I can point to indicators. But how much of that is the result of the last couple of years, and how much of that has been growing because of white middle class and working class anger at the elites that goes back to the 1990s? I don't know about that. I'm saying that if whites start to play identity politics, then basically we're facing some kind of disaster. I don't know how it's going to play out.
All right. Charles Murray. Not me. Not Glenn Loury. Not some other person you don't know. Charles Murray is saying that disaster is going to come when whites stop playing identity politics. That is the real danger that this country faces. And what can I say? As you know, I agree completely. I've been saying this for years now. This is not new to me. It is truly scary. Right. All right. Yeah. So there you have it. I'm not going to add much to that. I think Loury and these guys have been super clear. And as you know, I've been arguing this for a long, long time. So it's sad. It's tragic. It's scary. The left will bring this on, the irrationality in both sides. And what really will bring this on, and this I will add because they won't say it, what really brings this on is the fact that this country has moved so far away from our founding principles, that this country's moved so far away from the individualism and capitalism that this country's founded on. There is no such thing as white people, not as an identifier of anything substantial other than the color of their skin. There is no such thing as Latinos, Hispanics, or blacks, or anything like that, other than identifiers of color of skin. But as we drift away from individualism, as we stop treating each other as individualists, as we ignore, forget, turn our backs to the principles of individual rights, the principles of individual morality, the consequences are horrific, whether they come from the left or the right, doesn't matter. There are no good guys here. There's just a batch of bad guys. And it's not that I think that the right are worse than the left. I just think the right are more competent than the left. I think the right are more likely to succeed than the left. But the collectivism of both is immoral, irrational, evil. Because collectivism is immoral, irrational, evil. So it's not that you should support one group over the other or this group or that group. It's that we need to blow up the whole conception of these groups, of these so-called races, and start treating each other as individuals, and start thinking about a society, how to optimize a society for the benefit of individuals, not for the benefit of whites or for the benefit of blacks or for the benefits of Hispanics or whatever. But what does it take for individuals to live in a world in which they, as individuals, can pursue their own happiness? That's the project of America. That's the project of the Founding Fathers. That's the project we should be committed to. And that project entails individualism and a rejection of all forms of racism, a rejection of all forms of tribalism, a rejection of all forms of identifying people based on characteristics that are not in their control. Judging people based on those characteristics. Anthony, what about Charles Murray? Didn't you hear the segment about Charles Murray, or are you just going after blacks and Jews? Is that it? God. Somebody gave a good-sized contribution here. Richard, thank you. Really appreciate that. Really appreciate the support. Thank you. And that's great. It's great to have the support, particularly given a day where the haters are on the chat. We're now at $220 already, so we're making good progress towards the 400 at about the half-hour mark. If we do $200 every half hour, the 90-minute mark, we should be at $600, which is a good day. A good day. Yeah, I mean, the tragedy, of course, is that I don't think most blacks accept critical race theory. I don't think most Hispanics do. I don't think most people of any color view themselves primarily as members of that group. But the whole debate, the whole discussion, the media, everywhere you look is captured by the collectivists. It's captured by the intellectuals who are committed to these ideas. And sadly, it is minorities that determine history. Oh, Anthony is now calling me and Glenn Loury racist. What great company to be in. I mean, yeah. All right. The minorities change the world. And in this case, the elites. And the elites are committed to collectivism. And you, by playing into the collectivist game, some of you, not all of you, obviously, most of you in the chat are fine, but some of you are just playing into the game. You're giving them what they want. By pretending this is a racial issue, you are sanctioning them. You're emboldening them. You're strengthening them. And the only way to defeat them, and only the way to defeat collectivism, is to have an alternative, to fight for an alternative. So I'm looking for people who are willing to fight, not for whites, not against the left. I'm looking for people who are willing to fight all collectivists in the name of, not in the name of fighting collectivism, but in the name of fighting for individualism, fighting for freedom, fighting for rights, fighting for capitalism. And if we could get a significant number of people fighting for the good, fighting for the values that promote human life, that promote human flourishing, that's how we win. But if we join with one of the collectivistic groups that are slaughtering each other, we will be a party to the end of freedom in this country. All right, Anthony just declared Charles Murray a racist too. He's joined the leftists. He's joined the leftists in declaring Glenn Loury, Charles Murray, and myself as racists. And that's my point. In fighting the racist, in fighting collectivism, with collectivism, you fall into their trap, you become one of them, and it is lost. So, join me. Why not feed the troll? Feeding the troll is fun. God, you guys are way too serious. Join me in fighting the only battle that's worth fighting. The battle for each one of our lives as individuals, as individual human beings, as individual human beings dedicated to living our lives for our happiness. That's a battle worth fighting. People ask me how I have so much energy, because I do so many of these shows, I do debates, I travel around the world. That's what gives me energy. The battle is what gives me energy. The battle for good, the battle for virtue, the battle for freedom, the battle for capitalism, the battle for the most noble ideas in all of human history, the ideas of the Founding Fathers. And I have no problem making enemies on the right and on the left, and from some of you. That's fine. Because I know that I'm fighting for the right ideas. I'm fighting for America, a proper conception of what America is. Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks for the support. And of course, Jonathan has edited the book with Ayn Rand's conception of Americanism. That's what we should be fighting for. That's our manifesto. Ayn Rand's conception of Americanism as a land of individuals, as a land of individualism, not as a land of this race or that race or whatever. All right. That was my rant on the racists. But I was happy to see Charles Murray take my side on this issue. At least in that, we disagree on other things, on many things actually we disagree. He's a universal basic income guy. He's a mixed economy guy. He's certainly not a laissez-faire capitalist. But it's good to see that, at least in understanding certain aspects of the world out there, he agrees with my perspective. All right, we're now watching more of Glenn and Charles Murray. I encourage you to. They have an interesting conversation. I particularly like Loury, but in some things I like Charles Murray quite a bit. And again, he's certainly a nice guy. And it would be fun to debate him one day on the things we disagree on. That would be a lot of fun. Some of you have asked for Glenn Loury to be on the show. I've thought about that. I might try to get him on the show. Also, John McWhorter, I want to get him on the show as well. I might ask him about Ayn Rand. I might not ask him about Ayn Rand. This is related to a question that Henry asks. But, the very fact that he would come on a show, I think he did a show for the Ayn Rand Institute, so he must be aware of Ayn Rand, or at least gives us enough credence that he's willing to come on shows with us. So, yeah. Let's see. Let's take a few super chat questions, and then we'll go to the final topic, which is on trade. Let's see. Steven Pinker is having a new book published, set to be released in September. The title is Rationality, What Is It? Why It Seems Scary, Why It Matters. Invite him to talk about it. I think that's a great idea. I mean, I'd want to see the book first, but that would be yes, that would definitely be an interesting idea. And I'd like to have Steven Pinker on, and hopefully he'd agree to come on. I think he would. We'll see. Oops. Just because this is on topic, do you differentiate between trolling through racism motivated by opposing the left and racism motivated by racism? No, not really. Obviously, if you're motivated by racism, there's a sense in which that's worse. But if you're playing the game of racism, that is, so trolling through racism, if you're using racist terminology, if you're presenting a racist argument positively, then no. I mean, you're basically completely sanctioning the racists. You're making racism legitimate. You're legitimizing it, and from that perspective, you're just as bad, and you're moving the country towards just as bad of an outcome as the racist motivated by racism. And it's hard to differentiate between the two, of course. All right, I could use some optimism. Can you have John Allison on sometime? Sure. I don't know how optimistic John is, so I hope you won't be disappointed. But I keep meaning to ask John to be on the show, and I will do it. Scheduling interviews is just a hassle, and it's time consuming. The easiest way to get me to schedule an interview is to sponsor the show and to say, hey, I'll give you $1,000 if you have John Allison on. That would make it happen. Did you watch Deirdre's debate with Paul Krugman? And the reason I'm naming this is I have something to say. I have not watched Deirdre's debate with Paul Krugman. I will. I've seen Deirdre debate before. She's not a particularly good debater, I don't think. I like her a lot, and I like her talks, but I'm curious how that debate went. I'll look for it. Let me copy this to remind myself that I should watch Deirdre debate. But I did want to say this. For those of you looking for some optimism, I'm involved in this project called Ingenuism. Ingenuism.substack.com, or just put ingenuism.com, you'll get it. And the project is about optimism. The project is about economic progress, economic growth. Talks a lot about technology and the requirements for technological growth and the requirements for technological success. And I think it's an exciting project. I'm really thrilled by it. And it is very optimistic. It's not objectivist, although I think almost all of what we say there is consistent with objectivism, but it's not an objectivist project. Not everybody participating in it is an objectivist. But I encourage you to go and read and sign up for the Substack and read it. But also, we've just launched a YouTube channel on the Ingenuism, so I hope you will subscribe to the Ingenuism YouTube channel. 2 weeks ago, I published a interview with my business partner, who is kind of leading the Ingenuism effort, Robert Hendershot. So I encourage you to go watch that video. I think you'll really enjoy it. I think it's a fun video. It's a positive video. It's an optimistic video. So if you're looking for optimism, if you're looking for a positive perspective, please look at that and watch it and support it and subscribe to the channel. And then today, I'm super excited because today I published an interview with Deirdre McCloskey. So I interviewed Deirdre, and Deirdre is probably one of the most interesting economists alive today. I don't agree with her on a lot of things. She is religious. She's not quite as committed. She's too much of a fan of Adam Smith and too little of a fan of Ayn Rand. But she is amazing and she's interesting. And we have a discussion about progress and about what she calls the great enrichment, the last 250 years, and about capitalism and her views of capitalism. And she uses the word innovism to describe capitalism. She doesn't like the term capitalism. So please go watch that. It's Ingenuism, just the way it sounds. And you can find the channel on YouTube, or just put your own book, Deirdre McCluskey, and you'll find it there. But just go to Ingenuism on YouTube and you'll find. Please subscribe to the channel, watch the video, and most importantly, subscribe to the Substack. You know, the Substack is written weekly by Don Watkins. So it's really well written. It's got fascinating details and stuff, and it's really, really, really motivating and really, really, really positive and encouraging. And it's focusing on the good in the world. So those of you who are depressed by much of my show, go over to the Ingenuism side, and that's where you'll get the good stuff, the technology, the innovation, the progress, all the positives. Somebody writes here, United just bought 50 boom, I think 150, not 50, 150 supersonic aircraft. They put in an order for one. I just hope Blake tells everyone Ayn Rand changed his life after he revolutionized the world. I mean, Blake is one of the people that I'll be interviewing for the Ingenuism program, because I want all that technology-oriented, the positive, the growth stuff to be in the Ingenuism and to be part of it. And of course, Blake has a lot of interesting ideas about progress and what it takes and what it requires. So highly, highly recommend you sign up for the Ingenuism newsletter on Ingenuism, like ingenuity, ingenuism.substack.com, and Ingenuism YouTube channel. So I've got, coming up in terms of interviews, we've got Tyler Cowen. Tyler Cowen's another economist that I'm a big fan of. Scott Lincicome. I'm interviewing him tomorrow for the program. That'll be out in like 4 weeks. It'll be Tyler Cowen in 2 weeks. All about progress. And then, Don Watkins is going to do some interviews. So it's going to be, I think it's a very, very exciting program and a very exciting opportunity. But it needs your support. Not financial. We're not looking for any financial support for that. We just need you to subscribe, to share. That's positive stuff, not philosophical stuff. You can share it. Get people interested in what brings about progress, what brings about human well-being. That's what's exciting. All right, thank you, Starjet. Thank Ian for subscribing. Thank you, Bonnie. I hope many more of you subscribe. I think you'll enjoy my interview with Deirdre McCluskey. She's a real character. But she knows a lot, and she's really interesting. All right, I'm going to go through 4 more $20 and above super chat questions, and then we'll go back to talking about trade. I recommend to people who share a lot on social media to share the link to racism on Ayn Rand lexicon. I agree with that. Very effective. Even just covering the first paragraph can reach a lot of people. The lexicon is such a great resource. Absolutely. Great recommendation. I agree with that completely. That's from Naruto 1341. Thank you. And yes, I mean, share Ayn Rand on social media. Share her videos. Share sections from the lexicon. Share quotes from Ayn Rand. It's a great way to get people interested in Ayn Rand, and to get them exposed to maybe things they didn't know she said, topics they didn't know she talked about. So use the lexicon to get people engaged with Ayn Rand's ideas. It's a great way to do it. So thank you, Naruto. Great idea. All right, in Atlas, the reason, let me just see. Yeah, in Atlas, the reason Galt seceded is because he convinced a large number of people who were willing to listen. There is no Galt, and nobody is listening. So what happens if, when dim is realized and we get to this disaster? Joe, I'm trying to be optimistic here. What are you doing to me? What happens is really, really bad. What happens is we live through a horrific period of, and to some extent we're already living through it because statism is on the rise. It's been on the rise forever, and it's just getting to a certain critical mass. But it'll get significantly worse. Freedom will be limited. Those of us who believe in freedom will have to go underground. We'll have to hide our beliefs and hide our thoughts and try to get them out there in secret. Maybe there'll be an armed revolution, and we'll have to fight against the powers to be. That'll be tough, but you got to fight for the things you believe in. It will be rough. Now, I believe that the truth wins out in the end. It's really, really important to preserve Ayn Rand's writing. It's really, really important to protect them from the statists. It's really, really important, for example, to get them translated into every language known to man so that even if one country goes, other countries still have a record of what Ayn Rand wrote. And not just the novels, but everything. Everything should be preserved somewhere. And if that happens, right, if we can preserve the ideas, then there will come a generation that will use those ideas to fight the statists, to fight the collectivists on the right basis, on the basis of individualism, on the basis of freedom, a proper conception of freedom, freedom for the individual to live his life based on his rational mind in pursuit of his rational values. All right. Daniel says it's all related to where the world is going. This seems to be the main topic of interest from you guys. You said last year the world is due for a sane correction, similar to the Reagan-Thatcher in the 80s. I'm not sure I'm convinced, since this doesn't happen in a vacuum and philosophy is so rotten today. Do you still feel this way? Now, look, due for one and imminently going to happen are not the same thing. I think there is a chance that we get a swing to a better direction. But if you remember, I conditioned that on the Republicans rejecting Trump completely. I said that a prerequisite for a swing towards Reagan and Thatcher would be the complete demise of Trumpism. Trump losing in a landslide. And Trump, therefore, losing the Republican Party. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. Trump got more Republican votes than any Republican ever. His hold on the Republican Party is as strong almost as it was when he was president. Now, hopefully, his hold on the Republican Party will diminish over time. But as long as that is the Republican Party, then there is no opposition to the left. There's no semi-rational opposition to the left. The opposition to the left is a statist of the right. And if that is the case, then who's going to swing to where? So it's still true that for a swing to happen, Trumpism has to be repudiated on the right, and better people have to come to the forefront based on the same ideas that existed in the culture in the 70s. There were pro-markets, there were somewhat pro-freedom. Those ideas still exist in our culture today. They're still out there. They've just been silenced. And look, one of the reasons I was so anti-Trump was because I think he did more to silence, not silence violently, but silence through the bully pulpit, which he had, to silence the voices of reason, of capitalism, than any president ever. Because he was doing it from the right, because he was doing it in the name of business, in the name of America first, he was the one who discredited and alienated the better thinkers on the right, the better thinkers on the more rational right, on the more individualistic right. And therefore, those thinkers are underground. They're still there, but they just don't have the presence they used to. So I think the ideas are out there. We're out there. There are better people out there. There's still some good intellectuals out there. But we've been rejected from the mainstream. I mean, I've always been rejected from the mainstream, but they have been rejected from the mainstream, the better thinkers who are more. And until that changes, until the Republican Party brings them back, if it can survive. I don't think it can survive Trump. But no, I don't see right now how we get that swing back, that swing to Reagan-Thatcher, unless something happens in the next 2 years to completely and utterly discredit Trump and his ideas, and there's a real change on the right so that a Reagan and Thatcher could win. I mean, Reagan wouldn't be nominated today by the Republican Party. He'd be rejected by the Republican Party for nomination as president, never mind by the country. So I don't think we're quite due. I was hoping that if Trump lost in a landslide, we would be due, but he didn't. And he came up with a perfect game plan. He lost, and then he cried that he didn't lose, and a bunch of people, it turns out a lot of people, who are Republicans who accepted the idea that he didn't lose. So, and that maintained his power within the Republican Party because he's still a winner, even though he's a loser. This is 1984. This is perfect play of 1984. All right. Two more Super Chat questions, then we'll get to trade. Although, Thomas asks, Israel is the fiercest country in the Middle East, but are Arabs in Israel second-class citizens? Is their status like blacks under Jim Crow, having rights but less well protected, facing substantial discrimination? No, I don't think it's like Jim Crow. But is it 100% no? Is everything completely okay? No. Israel certainly has some laws that discriminate. I'll give you one. I mean, Jews have to go into the army. Arabs don't. Some Arabs do. They volunteer. But Arabs don't have to go into the army. Jews do. That immediately sets a barrier when you exclude certain groups. I mean, ultra-Orthodox Jews don't have to go either, just to give some balance, right? But yeah, there's certain laws relating to land that discriminate. They're not quite as extensive as Jim Crow. They're nowhere near as extensive as Jim Crow. But I don't think Arabs are, second-class citizens. Maybe 1.5, 1.25. They're not completely 100% share the same rights as the majority population, the Jews. But it's pretty close. It's pretty close. And we should condemn Israel for the discrimination it does express. The Supreme Court in Israel is pretty good about protecting the rights in lawsuits in courts of the minority against abuse by the majority, in this case of Arabs abused by the Jews. All right. Have you ever thought of doing short essay videos? They require more work, yes, but they are really easily digestible content, and with good editing and music, it could really attract attention. For me, it's too much work. Given my schedule, given everything that I do, given what interests me in doing, it's something other people should do. And it can be that I'm the only guy out there doing stuff. So it's very hard to do because anything edited is hard. And essays are very hard. And a short essay video has to be written out. Language has to be super accurate. It's beyond my, it's not my strength. And it's, others are doing that. For example, Mark Pellegrino. I don't know if you follow Mark Pellegrino on Twitter, but Mark Pellegrino's just started a short essay video series. And yeah, I mean, I think he works with Don Watkins. I'm not sure who he works with, but he's working with somebody to produce them. And they're quite good. And wow. And that is, so other people should do that. Other people who are more comfortable with that. All right. Somebody says, I don't think I'm taking this out of context, but this is the kind of people who show up in my chat. It's amazing. He says, the Ashkenazi House of Saud was installed by the British USA. The right took over British rule. The Ashkenazi House of Saud. Wow. I mean, the weird stuff when you start mixing up your racism and anti-Semitism and xenophobia and lack of knowledge of history and conspiracy theories. The stuff that people come up with is just stunning. Stunning. Anyway, all right. I wanted to talk about Section 232. Now, you probably think I'm talking about that one that deals with social media and the immunity with regard to comments and with regard to what third parties post. No, that's Section 230 of the Telecommunications Act. This is Section 232 of some trade bill that was passed in the 1960s. Sam says, it's hard to edit fluid clips of you because you interrupt yourself too often. I need to stop interrupting myself. You're on. Stop interrupting yourself. But I try to make clips when I can. Thank you, Sam. I appreciate that. And of course, Action Jackson creates lots of clips of me. And those, they're longer. They're not very, very short, so they're not YouTube friendly. They're longer. But I encourage you guys to share those. I think those are very, very shareable. By the way, Ali is just reminding us that the goal is $400, and we've slipped. The first half hour was fantastic. It's about $200. The second half hour has only been $138, $140. So, we're still short about $60 to get to the 400. So let's make this last, 25 minutes or so of the show, or however long we go. Let's make it, substantial financially. Let's make it so that we can get to 400 easily here. Maybe get to 600, 800, 1,000. I mean, why have limits? So, pay attention to Ali. Don't ignore Ali. Let me get back to Section 232. So Section 232 of the Trade Act of 1962. 1962 is a section of the law that gives the president broad authority to restrict imports deemed to be a threat to national security. I don't know how we managed until 1962 without such a law. So 1962 Congress generally, over the last, I'd say, 60 years or so, feels like it has too big of a burden. Like there are all these laws it has to pass, very controversial stuff. It's not worth their while to deal with it because then they lose votes and they get voted out of the House or voted out of the Senate, and they don't want the responsibility on certain issues. They just don't want it. So what they've done over the last 50, 60 years is give more and more and more and more authority to the president to let him do things that the Constitution explicitly makes the responsibility of Congress. I'll give you one example. I'll give you a few examples. One example is war. Congress is supposed to declare war. It's its responsibility. The president should not be able to engage in military action overseas, unless it's an emergency and you don't have time, without getting authorization from Congress and a declaration of war from Congress. Well, Congress has defaulted on that. And it's basically, over the years, given more and more and more power to the president to engage in military activity outside of U.S. soil. And again, it's undermined its own authority, responsibility given to it by the Constitution. Another issue that's true of is immigration. You saw all the executive acts that first Obama passed, and then Trump passed, and now Biden's passing on immigration. This is all Congress's job. Congress is responsible for immigration. But immigration is contentious. It's people get very riled up about it. And Congress just doesn't want the responsibility. It's too difficult. It's too complicated. So they've handed immigration to the presidency, and they write these vague laws, and then the president fills it all in with executive orders. It's also true in terms of almost every aspect of regulating business. Today, Congress, like in the 1930s, Congress wrote very, very detailed laws about how they want to regulate business. Today, they write laws that are shells, that lay the outline of what the regulation should look like, and then they hand it over to the executive branch, or, if you will, the fourth branch of government, the regulatory agencies, to actually write the content. The content is all filled by the regulators, not, right? Not the not Congress itself. So Congress defaults on that. Congress has no power to restrict immigration, but it has taken upon itself the power to restrict immigration, right? And once it took it on, it discovered there was a hot potato, and it's delegated the authority to the presidency. Right? All right. So one of the issues in which Congress has done this is trade. Congress explicitly is responsible for trade. Congress is explicitly supposed to deal with trade and treaties and so on. And yet it's delegated that authority to the president and does not want to vote and does not want to be engaged in issues of trade. And as a consequence, one of the powers it's given the presidency is Section 232, which basically allows the president to restrict trade based on, quote, national security reasons. Now, this is one of the worst trade laws on the book. National security reasons is not defined. Substantive and procedural loopholes are unbelievably wide. It basically gives the president almost unlimited authority to arbitrarily impose tariffs whenever he sees fit. And now lots of presidents have used it, but you saw it used more often and in the most arbitrary way by President Trump. Trump, on 8 different occasions, initiated the process of using Section 232 to impose tariffs on particular goods. The most notable of these are the steel and aluminum tariffs that were imposed and then not imposed, all claiming to be national security. But it's funny how national security went out the window when he gave exemptions of these tariffs to particular parties that he negotiated something else around. And suddenly, national security was no longer a concern. So, and of course, at some point, the claim was, and there was an investigation, the Commerce Department came back and discovered that automobiles, the importation of automobiles, was a national security issue. And there was talk about imposing tariffs on Japan and on Europe, allies of the United States, for the sake of national security. Luckily, that never happened. He never got to it. But that was the kind of stuff that the Trump administration legitimized as being part of what the right, the Republican Party represents. And of course, the consequences have been horrific. I mean, study after study are showing that, we probably, steel tariffs and aluminum tariffs destroyed in excess of 75,000 jobs, that steel prices in the United States are the highest they are pretty much in the world, which hurts the people who use steel, which is, there's 16 jobs of people who use steel for every steel job. It's been incredibly destructive to the U.S. economy. And yet, right, it's funny because Trump used national security excuse to put tariffs on steel. And then the solution to the problem his tariffs on steel created, that is, rise of steel prices, which made it uncompetitive for manufacturers of other stuff to compete, who had to buy steel. He was going to place national security tariffs on goods imported that use steel, and you can see how this spirals, how suddenly everything has tariffs, and everything is national security, all because you imposed one tariff at the beginning. And that's logically inevitable. It's logically, economically inevitable. So this national security excuse was a major theme of the Trump presidency, using national security as an excuse to raise tariffs. And again, we're not talking about tariffs primarily on China. Those were done under a variety of other reasons. We're talking about tariffs on our enemies, our mortal enemies, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, European Union, countries like that, South Korea. Sorry, I mean, God, I try to do positive shows. I do Your Own Rules for life. I do shows on fintech. I do shows on, once in a while, I do shows on art or movie reviews. And the reality is, and I'm not blaming you guys because you guys are probably, some of you guys are the ones who watch those shows. Very few people watch them. And it's clear that the market is sending me a message. The signal the market is sending is the doom and gloom shows sell. So do more doom and gloom. Now, if you want me to change the market signal, you have to help get more people to watch the more positive shows. You have to help promote them and share them and get people interested in them and so on. And of course, contribute more money in those shows. But as long as the most viewership happens when the most views I get is when I attack the left. Although I do get a lot of views when I attack the right because all the right-wing guys show up to attack me. But the doom and gloom sells. And it's doom and gloom, unfortunately, is also reality. So it's a combination of those two. So one of the hopes was that by getting rid of Trump, we'd maybe step back from using Section 232. There was even some talk about Congress repealing Section 232 and taking it upon itself to vote, which is difficult and hard, as the Democrats are discovering right now. Difficult and hard to get anything passed, but to vote on what is truly a national security threat, have a debate, vote on it, try to get past the filibuster, which is difficult. But alas, it turns out the Biden administration, of course, this was always the danger, loves Section 232 and is encouraging its extended use by Biden and by future presidents. It sees it as a legitimate tool to protect the so-called interests of American companies and American national security. And it's a great tool. It's power. You see, every time a president takes some power for himself, Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter, that power sticks. And the next president, that's the starting off point. So now Biden administration is talking about using Section 232 on many other goods out there. And you shouldn't be surprised to see tariffs going up under Biden, even though he claimed to be, everybody says, Democrats are the free trade, they're the globalists. No, Democrats have always been anti-trade, always. Republicans have been pro-free trade. Now, and this is what Trump did to the Republican Party, now everybody's anti-trade, left and right, Democrats and Republicans. And again, not just trade with China, trade, period. We are now left and right mercantilists. And if we need to use the national security excuse to impose our mercantilists list views, so be it. So, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, if you're interested in trade, globalizations, the massive benefits of globalization, the massive benefits of trade, then I really encourage you to listen to, or to read Scott Lincicome. I think that's how you pronounce it, Lincicome. He's on the Dispatch. He has a Substack. He writes for Cato. He's very, very good. He's very, very good on these issues. I'll be interviewing him tomorrow on these issues for the Ingenuist site. Go subscribe to the Ingenuism, ingenuism.substack.com, and Ingenuism channel on YouTube. All right. I mean, there's a lot more to say about trade. I'm a huge fan of trade. Trade is good. It's win-win. Adam Smith showed that trade was good. This is not controversial. Yeah, Trump was a populist, not a free trader. And now everybody's a populist because the left are populist too. So now we have our entire political spectrum is a populist political spectrum. And that's a disaster. That's a very, very bad place to be. All right, Duncan Kelly says, here's to being positive. Thanks, Yaron. That's $20 to being positive. I will, I think the next show will be a show on Yaron's rules. I'm not sure exactly which rule I'm going to do, but Saturday at 8 p.m., Yaron rules. Sunday will be a Q&A show, and Tuesday will be a Q&A show, but I'm going to try to get one more June show with Yaron rules in it. We're going to be doing 2 of those a month. And then we'll do other positive shows. Don't worry. Some of the Ingenuism stuff is going to spill over. I really enjoyed that show on fintech. I don't know if you guys did, but there's a lot of good stuff happening while the world burns around us. It's really, really interesting. Oh, Ben, thanks for subscribing to Ingenuism. That's great. All right, let's see. Right, Thomas writes, sugar and corn tariffs and subsidies have made America fat. Yes, I mean, sugar subsidies raise the cost of sugar, drive people not to use sugar, but to use sugar substitutes, which are subsidized in the form of subsidizing corn. So corn syrup is what we use because, if we could import sugar from the Caribbean, a place like the Dominican Republic, Jamaica, then sugar would be a lot cheaper than corn syrup, even with the subsidy. And your Coca-Cola would have real sugar in it, and it would be cheaper. It doesn't. It has corn syrup, which supposedly is less good for you, more harmful to you. And that is because we have tariffs on sugar. We've also made a lot of sugar farmers in Florida very, very, very rich, right? As a consequence. And of course, somebody like Rubio, the senator from Florida, loves sugar tariffs because he loves the contributions he gets from sugar farmers. And he loves now industrial policy because he wants to manipulate the economy to give favors to the people he likes and who contribute to his campaign at the expense of others. That's the new modern Republican Party. The party of sugar farmers, the party of subsidies and tariffs and social engineering and, economic central planning. It's different from the Democratic Party, but not that different. Not that different. All right. Curious to get your thoughts on the fate of the IDW. It's a good question. Peterson got addicted to prescription meds and nearly died from crackpot treatment. Yeah. Rubin is all in on Trump and election fraud. Weinstein is all in on anti-mRNA nonsense. Yeah. So, IDW was really always doomed to fail in the sense that there was no unifying factor. You don't really have that much in common between Ben Shapiro, Sam Harris, the Weinstein brothers, Steven Pinker. I don't know who else counted as IDW in those days. And Dave Rubin was kind of the glue. And partially the glue went away in the sense that he became more Republican, more Trumpist than classical liberal, and therefore more partisan than IDW ever wanted to be. I think even Ben Shapiro drifted towards becoming more partisan as he discovered that his audience was more and more Trump, and that when he criticized Trump, he would lose people. Same thing happened to Glenn Beck, but it happened, I think it definitely happened in a more dramatic way, but it definitely happened to Ben Shapiro. But the ideological differences, and the ideological differences not on politics, but the ideological differences on basic epistemology and metaphysics, and were just too much for the group to survive. Now, I was pretty positive on Weinstein, on Brett Weinstein, until he started with this. I don't get the mRNA nonsense, and calling this guy the inventor of the mRNA vaccine. If you really read about it, yeah, he was involved in some of the research, but there are many people who deserve far greater credit for mRNA than he does. And it's interesting that all of those people, as far as I can tell, are on the other side of this. That is, the supporters of the mRNA vaccine, not against it. So I find it interesting. But of course, what I think happened to Brett, and what I think happens to a lot of people in the IDW, it's something that we objectivists discovered a long time ago. And that is, it's difficult to be a voice in the wilderness. It's difficult to stand alone, and it's difficult to be engaged with day-to-day issues, always to be opposed, always to be in the smallest of minorities, always to be ridiculed, always to be attacked by everybody. And that people in those situations often tend to fold. You see with objectivists. I can think of several right now, right? Who can't take it, who can't handle it, and they need to become somehow more mainstream, whether it's within the objectivist movement, outside of the so-called broad objectivist movement, or outside of the objectivist movement. They can't stand the heat. They just can't. And I think you see it in the IDW. Ben Shapiro couldn't stand the heat of being rational and being anti-Trump as a consequence. So he gave in and he became pro-Trump. Rubin was very affected by Peterson. And then I think very affected by the comfort that's associated, and by the anti-left, and by the comfort that's associated with being with the group that will support you. and not be attacked by everybody. Peterson is just Peterson. I mean, he's still out there, and he's still very popular, and he's still as depressing as ever. Eric Weinstein is still out there. I'm not sure exactly what he's doing, but I think he's doing more positive things. But Brett also, Brett lost his job. Brett was attacked by everybody, didn't get a new job, relies on the internet to fund, his YouTube channel, provides half his income. That puts you in a precarious situation vis-a-vis your audience and vis-a-vis the stands that you take and the positions that you take. And let me say one other thing, and this is a challenge I face. It's very hard to constantly comment on the news, particularly when it's so negative, and to keep a rational perspective on it. It's so easy, and I'm sure I slip into this sometimes, to be superficial about something. Because literally every day you have to comment. Every day you have to say something original and something new. And it's hard. And it's really impossible. And it's easy to slip into superficiality, support for a mainstream position, second-handedness and something, not a real second-handed, but a laziness that just, you hear something and it makes sense and you just support that. And you see so many people slip into that. So many of the commentators, including objectivists, who particularly the ones that comment every single day or regularly, very, very regularly. It's very, very, very difficult. I think I do, I agree with Thomas that I do better than most. I think I do pretty well. I think I do quite well. But I'm sure I slip sometimes. I don't see it all. Just because you don't have time to. And there's a certain perspective that comes from, I only do one show a month. And if I can really think about the topic for a month before I do the show. Right? All right. So anyway, that's, yes, I agree, Tom. That's my view of the IDW. It's sad because I think there's some better people there, but I think that it's sad to see people lose their way. And, while I'm sympathetic to some of what Brett is doing, I mean, I'm going to do a show on the ivermectin, whatever it's called, the drug. I'll try to get Amesh Adalja on. I've also done a little bit of research into it. There's no question that the silencing of people because of their opinions, it's just stupid and wrong. And for YouTube to do it while within their rights, it's just, why are they doing it? They just, if anything, they're just giving it more attention than anything else. And it's why not have the debate? Why not have ivermectin? Anyway, something like that. Why not have the debate? Why not bring it out into the open? Why? I mean, this is the philosopher king mentality. You can't trust people to think for themselves. Now, I share that to some extent. Not trusting people to think of themselves. But okay, then let them suffer the consequences. But you shouldn't silence even the bad stuff, even the wrong stuff. It just plays into it. And it reinforces the person who's advocating for the wrong stuff. It reinforces their view. Ooh, the powers to be think I'm wrong. That's just encouraging. So it's just horrible. Ivermectin. Okay. It's interesting to read up about it because the science is weak and confusing about it. It's very weak, but the people who advocate for it are not wackos, right? They're not crazy people. So the doctors that I've seen that advocate for it are not the kind of people who advocated for hydro, whatever, you know what I talk about. It's not shrouded in conspiracies, at least not at the doctor level, right? Now, I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying a debate should be had. What are we afraid of? What's anybody afraid of? All right. And I don't buy that this is all driven by financial considerations. I don't buy that at all. All right, let's see. You said that Pol Pot was a D2, and wokeism is D2. Doesn't it then follow that we must stop wokeism before it kills a quarter of the population like in Cambodia, even if it doesn't last long after that? Sure, if you thought that that was possible, but we're not Cambodia. I don't think a D2 ideology can take over the United States. You can disagree, and that's fine. But it goes back to, I think, what Charles Murray and Glenn Loury was saying. The idea that 60% of the American population is just going to say, oh, okay, yeah, we're guilty, we're fragile, we'll just bow down and let you mow us down. It's just not going to happen. The idea that the U.S. military is just going to accept critical race theory and shoot any white person they see, like the Khmer Rouge did, it's just not going to happen. There's a significant difference between the ability of a small minority to take up arms in a country rife with civil war, a country just having been bombed by the United States, a country with no ruling ideology at all, a country that is dirt poor, that has no resources, a country with no significant military, that they could take that even for a short period of time in the United States is just unthinkable to me. Would making a sculpture of Goliath be pointless? Yes, of course it would be pointless. I mean, unless you're telling a story, but that's not the job of sculpture. Sculpture is not about storytelling. That's a movie. Making a movie about Goliath would be interesting. But a sculpture is more abstract and more concrete. Right? It's presenting you with a concrete that represents an abstraction. Right there. Now, what would what would a sculpture of Goliath represent? Authoritarianism, oppression, size, muscle. What would you be conveying with it? See, David works not because of the story of David and Goliath. The story is backstory. If you know it, it adds, but it's not the essence. You look at the David and what you see. I look up when I look at the David, and immediately my head goes up, right? My eyes go upward. What you see are the values. What you see is strength, commitment, focus, intensity. What you see is beauty. Now, those are values worth projecting. You can't project any positive values in a sculpture of Goliath. So, somebody says BAP would love the Goliath. Yes, BAP would. And indeed, if you go look at communist sculpture and Nazi sculpture, that's what they sculpted. They sculpted muscle for the sake of muscle. It was realistic in a sense, in quotes, but it was pure muscle, pure action, no mind, no values, no reason. With David, there's a mind behind it. This is why the beauty, it's called social realism, socialist realism, really for both the Nazis and the communists. With the David, you can almost see his mind. You can see the intelligence, the focus, the intensity, the thought. This is why what makes David so powerful is that it's the moment before. It's not an action. It's the moment before action. The sculpture over there is the moment after the action. And there's a magnificent sculpture, one of the greatest sculptures ever done, by Bernini, of David in the midst of the action. And you get three different Davids projecting three different values, projecting three different abstractions, but all positive. Something you couldn't do with a portrait of a monster. it's not worthwhile doing in painting, and it's not worthwhile doing in sculpture. Like Monk's Scream is powerful, but horrific. Why would you want to experience that? I don't know if you know Monk's Scream, right? But it's definitely art, and it definitely evokes an emotion. And it's objectively so. But why do you want that emotion? Why are those the values you want to project? Horror at existence. That's Monk's Scream. Monk has a kiss that's pretty good. Yeah, it's ugly. It's an ugly painting, but it's an ugly theme. It's trying to evoke something ugly in you. Dr. Book, I have now completed BBA, passionate about finance. I'm preparing for the CFA, level 1, good. Would you say completing the CFA is helpful towards my goal of reaching USA? Yes, I don't know where you are, but yes, I definitely think it is. Give me some advice to get to the USA. I mean, I would give you the advice based on what I did. Come and get an MBA, or come and get, even better, a master's degree in finance at a top university, like Columbia or Berkeley. They have great masters of finance degrees. So come and get a second degree, either an MBA. MBA is hard to get a job afterwards because there's so many MBAs. But a master's degree in finance is unusual. There are not many of them. And they're hard programs to get into. Oh, you're from India. They're hard programs to get into. But if you get into them, you're definitely going to get a job when you graduate. So really, really good stuff. So that's how I would recommend getting to the US. But a CFA is a step in the right direction, definitely. Michael asks, Rudy Giuliani just got his law license suspended. I think he's going to be prosecuted soon. I've said this before. I hate to, I don't know what he's getting prosecuted for, and I hope it's for good reason. I hope they suspended his license for an objective, good reason, not for a political one. But it couldn't happen to a nicer human being. I mean, Rudy Giuliani deserves it. He is scum. He is a bad, bad man. This is justice for what he did in the 1980s. This is justice for him going after some of the most productive people in the universe with frivolous lawsuits, sending them to jail, using RICO. He was the first guy to use RICO for non-mafia related crimes. But he used RICO, first one to use RICO on gangster organized crime related. He used RICO against financiers, most of whom were ultimately found innocent. But by then, because RICO allows you to confiscate their wealth, their assets, freeze their accounts before they're found guilty, their lives were destroyed. Their businesses were destroyed completely. I mean, as a finance guy, he's one of the great villains in America of the last 50, 60 years. Richard Wolff recently made the comment, there's no labor shortage, there's a self-respect surplus. Basically implying working a low-wage job means you have no self-respect. Yeah, I mean, Richard Wolff is, all right, I'm not going to insult him too bad because I am going to debate him soon, so I'll leave my insults for the debate. But that's perfect. He has no respect for the working class, no respect for the working man. And it's intellectuals like him that alienate people from the world. And he claims to be a spokesman, a defender of the working class. How vicious an idea is that? All right, let's see. People are saying the condo building in Miami collapsed because Florida has so few building codes and regulations. No, I mean, the building in Miami collapsed probably because somebody built a lousy building. And somebody insured a lousy building and didn't do their job. Are accidents going to happen in a free market? Are bad actors going to exist in a free market? Yeah. They're just not, but they're not going to be the dominant. They're going to be the exception. But of course they're going to blame capitalists for this, or they're going to blame perceived capitalists for this. But yeah, there are crooks out there. There are people who skim. There are people who take shortcuts. There are people who do bad things. Always are. And it's not at all surprising that the media would take the route of blaming them like that. Another idea for a clip is what you said about using racism to troll. I listen to you and Alex Epstein a lot at work. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about what I see on my Facebook and isn't covered by objectivists, I hear. All right, Action Jackson, you hear that? It's a suggestion about a clip. Let's see. I meant to put $20 on my question. Which one was that? Oh, this one. Okay. Have you? He added $20. Tunka, have you read any Gary Taubes books? Would love if some of your rules covered the mental and physical health. Thank you for all you do. I have not. I can look into that, but I do cover some mental health stuff. I think everything I do is consistent with the idea of mental health, right? All the rules so far have been oriented towards your mental health and improved mental health. I haven't really talked about the physical as much. I know less about it, but I'm happy to talk about that as well, about exercise, the importance of exercise, what kind of exercise. I will talk about that as well. But I'll look into Gary Taubes' books. I've heard about him, obviously, but I don't think I've read any of them. Would the Nazis have defeated both Soviets and British if the U.S. had not intervened? Probably not. I don't think they could have defeated both. I mean, the thing, I mean, what the U.S. shouldn't have done is supported the Soviets and let basically Russia and Germany fight it out. And I think that would have given a lot of breathing space for the British. And of course, the U.S. intervened because Germany declared war on the U.S. But I do not think the Nazis would have won, no. It's hard to tell how it would have played out. There might have been a stalemate between the Nazis and the British, because the Nazis would be consumed by internal strife, consumed by fighting the Soviets, not have the energy to go after the British, but at the same time, the British wouldn't have the capacity to destroy the Nazis. Now, of course, that could have all changed if the Nazis would have developed nuclear weapons, but it doesn't look like they were close. It really doesn't. I vote for a video clip of you talking about advocating individualism versus damning racism. I agree. I vote for that, too. Action Jackson. I saw him on the chat earlier, now he's disappeared. So I don't know if he's listening or not. Who knows? That was a very well-put formulation of justice applied to positive and negatives. Would share that all day. Excellent. Thank you. Let me see who wrote that. I vote for, who wrote that? Who wrote that? Who wrote that? Ah, it's disappeared on me. Sorry. Yeah, good comment. I appreciate that, and I will make sure that we do that. All right. Charlie writes, when are you appearing on Stitch and Adam's show? Adam Frieded said he reached out to you, and you said yes. Is there a date? There isn't, only because I've been too busy to get back to him. Work, hedge fund work has just been all-consuming the last couple of weeks. I've still done a ton of shows, but it's really consumed all my brain power and all my energy and time. So I will get back to Adam shortly about scheduling that. I do expect to do the show soon. I don't know who the Stitch and Adam show is, but I I said yes, for whatever that's worth. All right. Nice moment when Donahue asks Rand what's wrong with looking forward to getting out of this life to an afterlife. She says, because this universe is wonderful. Absolutely. I mean, politics sucks. Critical race theory sucks. Racism generally sucks. The left suck, the right suck. There are a lot of people out there in the world who do sucky things. But my life is fantastic. I hope your life is too. And you should orient your life to making it fantastic. And if it's not fantastic, figure out how to make it fantastic. Listen to Yuan's Rules for Life. It could be called Yuan's Rules for Making Your Life Fantastic. But yeah, make your life fantastic. There are no excuses. The universe is wonderful. Life, being alive, is wonderful. So don't let the politics, don't let the creeps, don't let the weirdos, don't let the bad guys dominate you. Yeah, do like Thomas, just live with awesome music. Or as he does, not with, he lives in awesome music. Sam asks, focus, Sir Brooke. This one is for a clip. Can money buy happiness? Is there a relationship between money and love? Can money buy happiness? It certainly can contribute to happiness. It can't buy you happiness. It can't guarantee you happiness. But without enough money, happiness is almost impossible. And the more money you have, the more opportunities and options you have to pursue your values and achieve them that allow for happiness. I give you an example. Let's say your spouse gets sick. And let's say the only treatment that exists is very, very expensive and involves flying her to Switzerland to get the treatment. Having the money to do that will buy you happiness. Because without it, you're losing your loved one and you're not going to be happy. With it, you get to keep your loved one and you will be happy. So money can't guarantee it. Lots of people who have money are not happy. Most people who have it who are not happy. But money gives you options. And options give you more control over your environment, more control over the world out there. That's what money represents. Money represents control over your environment. Money represents control over nature, control over disease, control over hurricanes. Build a strong house. Control over man-made disasters and power outages. You have a generator. So to the extent that money gives you control over nature, it gives you possibilities with regard to happiness that don't exist. And certainly if you don't have any money. So some minimal amount of money is necessary for happiness. And the more of it you have, again, the more control, the more options you have, and therefore it enhances and contributes, to your happiness. Sam also writes, he says, is there a relationship between money and love? No, I don't think so. I mean, certainly when you don't have money, the stress that confers, or if you don't have money because you're a failure, that makes love difficult, both because in terms of your own self-esteem and because of somebody else, the person you'd want to love you, maybe losing respect for you and not loving you because you're a failure, you're not successful. But no, gold diggers are not love. So is there a relationship between love and money? No. Except to the extent that money is a sign to yourself and to the world out there of success. But it's not the only sign for success. And you can certainly not have a lot of money and fall in love. And if you're successful in your career, even if you don't make money, for example, as a teacher, as an academic, as an artist, you can be an artist. You can be a lot of things and not make money and not have a lot of money. And that doesn't diminish the love. Think about how many poor people fall in love. How many people you stay in love? What is your favorite quote by Ayn Rand? I don't really have a favorite quote by Ayn Rand. I don't think in quotes. I don't remember quotes. I don't hold that. Yeah, I don't have one. Sorry. I probably should, but I don't. All right. Great. You did it again. You did, through the super chat, we raised more than $400. We made it $520. So thank you, everybody. $525. Sam says, Ayn Rand wrote, to love is to value, and money is a means of expressing value. Yes. It's a means of expressing values. It's a means of achieving certain values. Certain values you can't achieve without money. Let's see. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thanks for the support through the super chat. Thanks, Sam, for some good questions and a good final comment. Thank you, Brian. Thank you for those of you who gave, contributed quite a bit of money today. Don't forget to like the show before you leave. Give it a thumbs up before you leave. Really appreciate that. It helps with the algorithms. Don't forget to share, particularly the short clips. Share. And what else? Don't forget, if you're not a subscriber, please become a subscriber. We're shooting for that 100,000. We need your support. And click on the bell. That way you'll be announced. It'll be announced when I go live. And of course, if you want to support the show on a regular basis, please do so at yaronbrookshow.com/support. I'd love to get like another 500 contributors. That would be so cool. That'd be so cool. I mean, I'm really shooting for like 2,000 contributors. We're about 600 I know. But to getting to 2,000, that number, I think 2,000 that means you really have influence. That's big. So please help me get to the 2,000 contributors. And you can do that by contributing to the show at yaronbrookshow.com/support, Patreon, Subscribestar, all locals, all platforms where you can support the Yaron Brook Show. Don't forget to subscribe to Individualism. Go watch the Individualism video of me interviewing Deirdre McCluskey. I think you'll really enjoy that, particularly if you're looking for some positive materials. Sign up for the newsletter, the Individualism newsletter, because it has lots of great positive content. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. See you on Saturday for Yaron Rules Part 5.